probably the only advice I would give to an actor is you better want it more than anything else.
One of Redford's...
What if the story behind a 90-year-old's life was far more heartbreaking than the headlines suggest? Meet Robert Lunsford, an everyday elder whose days are marked by a quiet sorrow that few people see. Over the decades, he's faced personal loss, unexpected tragedy, and a weight that has shaped every choice he makes. Just like the legendary actors whose lives we've all admired, Lunsford's journey is a testament to endurance and the hidden battles that lie beneath the surface. In today's video, we pull back the curtain on his past, uncovering the untold struggles that have defined his 90 years. Get ready to explore the reality of a life that, on the surface, seems ordinary but is anything but. Stay with us as we reveal how Robert Lunsford lives, and why his story deserves to be heard. In the quiet light of a late summer afternoon, the story of a man who has been an emblem of Hollywood's golden era begins in a modest house in Santa Monica. Born on August 18, 1936, Robert's first breath was accompanied by the gentle hum of a milkman's cart and the steady rhythm of his father, Charles, who once sold milk before turning to accounting. His mother, Martha Hart, a woman of quiet strength, nurtured his dreams even as the world around them seemed to spin too fast for a boy of 18. When tragedy struck in 1955, when Martha died from complications after giving birth to twin girls who did not survive, the sudden loss carved a deep scar into the young man's heart. He later admitted to taking her presence for granted, a regret that lingered like a shadow in the corridors of his life. The grief was compounded by a sense of helplessness. After her death, the family struggled financially, and Robert, still a teenager, found himself drifting into rebellion. Rebellion, for Robert, manifested in petty theft and a reckless love for the rush of drag racing on dusty back roads. An arrest for stolen jewelry jolted him awake to the realization that his life was spiraling toward a path he could not sustain. Yet the pull of sports and the promise of a better future led him to the University of Colorado on a baseball scholarship. He caught the baseball diamond's rhythm, but the rhythm of his soul had other plans. The newfound freedom of college life ushered in an era of heavy drinking that cost him his scholarship and forced his departure from campus. This moment of failure, though painful, became another turning point, a crucible that forged a resolve to find a new direction. Seeking a fresh start, Robert fled across the Atlantic, immersing himself in the European art scene. He studied painting in a small studio in Paris, where the brushstrokes of the masters taught him that life could be captured not only on stage but also on canvas. The experience broadened his perspective, allowing him to see beyond the immediate and the conventional. Eventually, he returned to the United States, determined to pursue acting, a decision that would forever alter his trajectory. Hollywood, with its glitter and glamour, seemed like a fitting stage for a man whose personal narrative was a mosaic of triumphs and trials. Yet even as his career began to take off, the shadows of his past lingered, shaping his choices and his character. In 1958, a young Robert married Lola Van Wagenen, a woman who would become his steadfast partner through a century of highs and lows. Their early marriage was tested by the crushing loss of their infant son, Scott, who died from an illness within weeks of birth. The tragedy struck against a backdrop of financial instability, leaving the couple emotionally bruised. Robert later described this period as one of the darkest times of his life. Despite the grief, they pressed forward, having 3 more children: Shauna, Jamie, and Amy. Their second son, Jamie, was born prematurely and battled severe breathing problems caused by hyaline membrane disease. The fear of losing a child haunted Robert, especially as he watched Jamie's fragile health struggle through adolescence and into adulthood. Jamie's relentless fight against ulcerative colitis and the subsequent need for multiple liver transplants in his 30s further tested the family's resilience. The father's love was palpable. He flew from New York to Omaha each weekend to be by his son's side in the hospital, even as his own career demanded long hours on set. The demands of a burgeoning career, coupled with the weight of family responsibilities, strained Robert and Lola's relationship. Their marriage, once regarded as a Hollywood stronghold, was tested by long separations, financial pressures, and the emotional toll of raising children with serious health challenges. By 1985, after 28 years of marriage, they chose to separate, a decision framed as mutual but laden with regret. Though their divorce was legal, the bond between them remained strong, anchored by their shared love for their children. In interviews, Robert has spoken of the sorrow he felt not only at the end of his marriage but also at its impact on the family, acknowledging that the decision was one of survival as much as love. Tragedies seemed to keep pace with the man's personal life. In 2020, the death of his son Jamie from liver cancer sent shockwaves through Robert's world. The loss felt like an echo of the past, where the fragility of life had repeatedly struck his family. Jamie, who had survived 2 liver transplants and many other health battles, was more than a son. He was a storyteller and environmental activist, carrying forward a legacy of hope. The grief Robert experienced was profound, yet he chose to grieve quietly with his family, honoring the privacy that had always been a hallmark of his public persona. In a statement from his publicist, Jamie was described as a loving son, husband, and father, touching everyone he met with his warmth. The passing of his son served as a stark reminder that fame and fortune could not shield one from the deepest wounds life could inflict. Even before Jamie's final battle, the family had endured other heart-wrenching incidents. Shauna, one of Robert's daughters, faced a terrifying encounter near Salt Lake City when her car lost control and plunged into the icy Jordan River. A brave passerby dove into the freezing water, rescuing her and saving her life. Though the rescue was miraculous, the experience left Robert reeling, his mind flooded with the fragile nature of existence. Yet the narrative of loss did not end there. In 1983, Sid Wells, Shauna's fiancé and a journalism student from the University of Colorado, was murdered in his apartment by a gunshot wound to the head. The primary suspect, a roommate named Smika, faced insufficient evidence and later vanished, leaving the case unsolved. Shauna, devastated by the loss of the love of her life, was haunted by the unanswered questions surrounding Sid's death. Robert himself reflected on the murder as another cruel twist of fate, feeling as if the universe was playing a relentless game of cruel irony. The unresolved crime added a layer of anguish to the family's already heavy heart, weighing on them long after the investigation faded. Through all these trials, childbirths lost, illnesses battled, a divorce navigated, and murders unresolved, the narrative of Robert's life is one of endurance. Each tragedy seemed to sharpen his protective instincts for the ones he loved, turning his vulnerability into a shield of empathy and caution. His love for his children grew deeper with each crisis, his protective gaze tightening as the fear of losing them became a constant companion. Even as he faced the starkness of life's unpredictability, he continued to seek stories that mattered, channeling his pain into the art of performance and the stewardship of the natural world. In the quiet moments at his ranch in Utah, surrounded by the silence of the surrounding mountains, Robert often sits alone with memories, letting the past's weight settle as a quiet affirmation of his own humanity. The story that unfolds, then, is not merely the glittering tale of an actor who captivated audiences worldwide. It is the narrative of a man who, beneath the veneer of stardom, has navigated grief, love, and loss with a quiet, steadfast heart. Robert's life demonstrates that every stage, whether on a Hollywood set or within a family's living room, carries the possibility of both triumph and tragedy. His journey, marked by the loss of children, the pain of illness, and the ultimate surrender to grief, stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In the end, it is not the applause or the accolades that define him, but the quiet strength he carries forward, a testament to the enduring power of love and the relentless pursuit of hope, even in the face of life's harshest challenges. Robert Redford sits in the cool shade of his Utah ranch, the wind whispering across the rolling hills that have become his refuge. The years have brought him a quiet dignity that was forged in the furnace of grief, the sharp sting of sudden loss, and the slow, relentless march of time. When the boat slipped on a foggy night and Natalie would vanish beneath the surface, the world seemed to hold its breath. Redford had shared more than a few scenes with her. He had felt the pulse of a genuine soul who, under the gilded veneer of stardom, carried the ordinary heart of a friend. The loss reverberated through his life, a painful reminder that no amount of fame could shield anyone from the cruel unpredictability of existence. In the months that followed, Redford turned to the people who had stood by him the longest. Paul Newman, who had first met him on the set of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, became more than a co-star, he became a brother. Their friendship was a dance of wit and tenderness. They would pull pranks on one another, Newman once turning an old dented Porsche into a sculpture after Redford gifted it to him on his 50th birthday. Yet beneath the jokes, their bond was a lifeline. When Redford's marriage to Lola Van Wagner crumbled in 1985, Newman was there to offer a steady hand, to remind him that love could still bloom even after the most painful dissolutions. Their companionship became a quiet chorus of laughter that soothed the sorrow that had begun to settle in Redford's chest. The grief of losing Natalie and the support of Newman were not the only emotional turning points that marked Redford's life. The cold case of Sid Wells's murder cast a long shadow over his family. The unresolved tragedy, with a suspect who vanished, left a lingering ache that refused to fade. Robert Redford found himself wrestling with a sense of injustice that lingered like a stone in the well of his heart. The unresolved nature of the case, coupled with the loss of a dear friend, made his sense of security fragile, and fragile moments of solitude felt like a heavy cloak. In the face of these trials, Redford made a decision that would redefine his legacy. The temptation to cling to the bright glare of the silver screen faded as his inner compass began to point toward a different horizon. He moved from in front of the camera to behind it, taking the helm as a director. His first feature, All the President's Men, opened with a quiet determination that he would no longer be content to play a role in someone else's story. By turning the director's chair toward projects that resonated with his conscience, Redford chose authenticity over applause. The decision to step behind the camera was not merely a career shift, it was a refusal to let the world's applause dictate the rhythm of his life. It was on this path that Redford found a new calling, one that would become the cornerstone of his legacy. In 1978, he founded the Sundance Institute, a sanctuary for filmmakers who dared to challenge the status quo. He imagined a place where independent cinema could flourish, where stories that might otherwise be drowned out by blockbuster soundtracks could find an audience. He used his name, his wealth, and his relentless drive to bring this vision to life. Sundance became a movement, a gathering place where daring storytellers could collaborate without the constraints of commercial expectation. The Institute's workshops nurtured generations of filmmakers who carried the torch of creativity into the future. Redford's leadership at Sundance was a testament to his belief that art should be accessible, that storytelling should be a collective endeavor, not a solitary pursuit. Even as the Sundance movement grew, Redford's own life continued to evolve in quieter, more intimate ways. The physical toll of nearly 90 years was unmistakable. His once agile legs now moved with deliberate slowness, and a sharp headache could strike him when the air changed. The relentless erosion of health, coupled with the realization that the same fame that had given him wealth had also carved out a space of loneliness, made him withdraw further into the serenity of nature. Yet Redford did not surrender. He found comfort in the simple pleasures that surrounded him. The laughter of grandchildren playing on the porch, the smell of fresh pine in the morning, the steady march of conservation projects that he had championed for decades. He worked on preserving the very landscapes that had become his solace, turning his personal energy into a lifelong stewardship of the environment. As his 90-year milestone approached, Redford's reflection turned inward. He acknowledged how the cost of fame had taken a toll on his spirit. Wealth, recognition, and the power to shape narratives had come at the expense of personal peace. He chose to step back from acting, to let the world breathe around him. That choice was not a surrender but a deliberate move toward tranquility. He no longer wanted the frantic heartbeat of Hollywood's glare. Instead, he found solace in the quiet rhythm of the hills and the presence of his grandchildren, who taught him that joy could be found in the simplest of moments, sharing a meal under a starlit sky, listening to the wind carry the stories of a new generation. Redford's environmental activism became an extension of this quiet strength. He continued to use his platform to champion conservation, to support the protection of wild places that he could still walk in the summer. He understood that legacy is not measured only by accolades, but by the impact one has on the world. The Sundance Institute would carry his name into a new era of independent filmmaking, a beacon for daring storytellers. Even after he left the limelight, his fingerprints would remain on the craft, on the films that dared to ask hard questions, on the documentaries that held the world in suspense. The tragedies that shadowed Robert Redford's life, Natalie Wood's disappearance, the unraveling of his marriage, Sid Wells's unsolved murder, the physical decline that came with age, are all threads that weave the complex tapestry of his existence. They reveal a man who, when confronted with sorrow, used his pain as a catalyst for purpose. His grief did not become a prison. Instead, it became a door leading to new opportunities, to founding Sundance, to championing environmental causes that would outlive him. He taught us that even in the depths of sorrow, there is a path forward, illuminated by resilience and the quiet companionship of friends. Standing at the edge of his life, Redford feels the weight of his achievements and the ache of his losses, yet he carries them with a quiet grace. He has lived a life that many only glimpse through the silver screen, a dashing Sundance kid, a charming Jay Gatsby, a fearless journalist in All the President's Men. Those who know him, however, see a man who stood by his children in their darkest hour, a friend who valued loyalty above all else, a grandparent who finds joy in the simple presence of his grandchildren. As he approaches the twilight of his days, he serves as a living reminder that strength can be quiet, that redemption can come after profound sorrow, and that the human spirit, when guided by love and purpose, can leave an indelible mark on the world. His story, a narrative of triumph and tragedy, is more than Hollywood legend. It is a testament to endurance, adaptability, and meaning. The quiet man on the Utah ranch, surrounded by family and the wind, reflects on a life filled with both joy and sorrow. He reminds us that even in the face of overwhelming loss, there is always a path toward peace, a way to honor those who have been lost, and a legacy that will inspire future generations. The saga of Robert Redford, now 90, now living with a sadness that only the heart knows, remains a shining example of how one can turn life's darkest moments into a source of light and hope. Robert sat on the porch of his Utah ranch, the wooden slats worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The sky above was a pale blue, interrupted only by the occasional white cloud that drifted like a slow-moving thought. He watched his grandchildren, a mix of laughter and curiosity, as they chased each other among the low pines. The old man felt the same quiet contentment that had once kept him alive on the set of a film, and the same ache of loss that still lingered in the corners of his heart. He did not speak of the ghosts that visited him on quiet evenings, the woman who vanished in a lake, the child who never returned, the silent room where the old piano keys waited for his touch. Those memories were as close to him as the wind that stirred the leaves, and yet he chose to focus on the living. He could hear the soft hum of a distant hummingbird, a tiny reminder that life continued beyond the pain. When the sun began to set, turning the horizon a fiery orange, he would take his cane and walk a short distance into the brush. He would stand, palms pressed against the rough bark, feeling the coolness of the night as it wrapped around him. In those moments he found clarity. He remembered the nights he spent on a film set, the camaraderie of fellow actors, the thrill of capturing a moment that would resonate for generations. He recalled the exhilaration of establishing the Sundance Institute, watching a room of young filmmakers pour their hearts into projects that challenged the status quo. He understood that he had been blessed with both triumph and tragedy, and that the balance of those forces had carved the man he had become. Redford's voice softened as he reflected on the path that had led him to this porch. He had once been a restless dreamer, eager to carve a name in the world of cinema, a young man who believed that stories could change lives. In the early days, the world was a stage of dazzling lights and endless possibility. Yet, as the years unfolded, the glamour faded, revealing a harder truth, that the cost of success could be an endless cycle of loss. He was a man who had witnessed his own circle of family and friends dissolve in ways that left him hollow. But instead of succumbing to the ache, he turned inward, seeking purpose where others might find despair. He would have liked to have found solace in the comfort of a quiet corner, in the presence of a lover who would share his joys and pains. Yet the people who once filled his life were gone. He carried the weight of their memories, but he also knew that grief can be a silent companion that, when acknowledged, offers a chance to grow. He had learned that to honor those who had been lost, one must continue moving forward with dignity. In that sense, he did not see his later years as a decline, but rather as an extension of his early ambition, to be a steward of the stories that mattered most, to guide others, and to protect the environment he loved. The desert of his mind was not empty. Instead, it was an expanse of thought and hope. The land he owned, the sagebrush and the towering juniper trees, were witnesses to his life's journey. When he walked across his property, he saw the seasons change, and with them, he saw the lessons that life had offered him. The wind that swept over the canyons was a reminder that change was inevitable, but so was resilience. He remembered a particular afternoon in 1979 when he had driven his children to a movie set in the heart of Utah. The landscape was raw, unspoiled, and he could see the spark of possibility in the eyes of the young actors who had gathered there. That experience had laid the foundation for his later work at Sundance, where he championed films that celebrated the beauty of the natural world. His thoughts drifted to the children he had once cast as his own. He had been a father, a mentor, a friend. His children had grown up on his ranch, learning to respect the land and to appreciate the art that surrounded them. He had shared with them a belief that the world was a vast, unexplored film waiting to be written. They would sit around the fire with him on cool evenings, and they would ask questions about the world beyond the valley. He would respond with stories of his own youthful adventures, tales of the silver screen, of the thrill of capturing a scene that would resonate with people across the world. He saw his grandchildren's eyes light up with curiosity. It reminded him of the spark that had first ignited his career. When the wind began to pick up, the old man's mind would turn toward the future. He had given a voice to the unseen, the unheard, and the unknown. His activism, both in environmentalism and in the arts, was a testament to his enduring belief that every life had a purpose. He saw the world as a living story, and he wanted to be a guide for those who would write it in the future. He remembered his time working with the Sundance Institute, helping young filmmakers navigate a labyrinth of creative obstacles. He had seen a young woman struggling to find her voice in the world, and he had encouraged her to embrace her authenticity. She later returned to thanking him for the patience that had allowed her to grow. That moment had become a living symbol of the power of mentorship, a reminder that one act of kindness could reverberate for decades. The silence of the night brought with it a sense of peace that seemed almost impossible to achieve. He felt the presence of his grandparents, of his childhood, and the memory of his father's quiet pride. He knew that the life he had lived was not a perfect one, but it had been meaningful. He had seen the world in all its beauty and in all its sorrow. He was a witness to the changing world that he had come to know and love. And when he looked back at his journey, he found that every mistake had been a lesson, and every success had been a gift. He was a man who had lived fully, and in the quiet moments of the present, he could sense the quiet strength that had sustained him through so many trials. His thoughts wandered to the quiet man on his ranch who had found joy in the simple presence of his grandchildren. He could see himself there, a quiet man in the midst of a vast landscape, a man who had once been a Hollywood icon and had now become a humble caretaker of the land. He had always understood that his legacy would not be measured in awards or recognition, but in the impact that he had on the world. He remembered his days on set when he had been given the chance to bring a story to life. He had seen the power of that story to move people, to change their perspective, to make them understand the importance of protecting the environment. That knowledge had driven his activism, and his commitment to preserving natural resources for future generations had only grown stronger. When the sun finally set, painting the world with a warm glow, he sat back on the porch and breathed in the crisp desert air. He had lived a long life, filled with both triumph and tragedy, but his heart was still young. He had learned to live with the knowledge that grief and joy are two sides of the same coin. He had learned that love, even when it is painful, is a gift that carries the power to heal. He felt gratitude for the people who had stood by him, the people who had offered their support in the darkest of times. He also felt gratitude for the environment that had kept him alive. He knew that his days were drawing to a close, but he also knew that his life was a testament to the power of hope. In the final hours of his life, the quiet man on the ranch would stand with a sense of contentment, knowing that he had lived a life that mattered. The world had never stopped spinning, the stars had never stopped shining. And as his breath grew slower, his heart carried the memory of all that he had loved and all that he had lost. He would not die in solitude, for he was surrounded by the love of family, by the support of friends, by the stories that had shaped him, and by the land that had given him strength. In that moment, he could sense that the world would continue to move forward, that his legacy would live on in the hearts of those he had touched. The wind whispered through the sagebrush, and it carried his story forward, a testament to the fact that even in the face of sorrow, there is always a path toward peace, a way to honor those who have been lost, and a legacy that will inspire future generations. In the quiet moments of his twilight, the old man on the Utah porch finally feels the peace he has sought for decades. He recognizes that his life, rich with cinematic triumphs, fierce activism, and profound loss, has forged a quiet, enduring legacy that lives on in the stories he helped tell, the filmmakers he mentored, and the love shared with his family and the land, ensuring that even as his own breath slows, the whisper of his journey continues to inspire future generations.